Emma Carter wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, her hands aching from the long shift at the diner. It was past midnight, but the tiny restaurant on Fifth Avenue was still bustling with late-night customers. The smell of grease, stale coffee, and exhaustion clung to her uniform as she cleared another table, fighting back tears. She couldn't afford to cry. Not now. Her mother's hospital bills were due in 3 days, $20,000 she didn't have. Her little brother, Liam, barely 10 years old, needed school fees, food, and a roof over his head. And today, as if fate had conspired against her, an eviction notice had been taped to the apartment door. She read it over and over, her fingers gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled in her hands. Final notice: pay within 72 hours or vacate the premises. 72 hours. 3 days. That was all she had. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. She had already begged for an advance at the diner, but her manager had refused. Her second job, cleaning office buildings at night, barely covered groceries. There were no loans left to take. No relatives to help. "I'm running out of time," she whispered to herself as she dumped a plate into the sink. "Emma, your shift over," her coworker, Tonya, said gently, patting her shoulder. "You look like you're about to collapse." Emma forced a weak smile. "I'm fine." "Liar." Tonya narrowed her eyes. "You've lost weight. And I know that look in your eyes. What's going on?" Emma hesitated. The words felt like poison in her throat. She wasn't one to ask for pity, but the burden was suffocating her. "My mom's hospital bills are overdue, and my landlord's kicking us out in 3 days," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do, Tonya. I've tried everything." Tonya's face softened. "Damn. I wish I could help, but it's okay." Emma quickly shook her head. "I wasn't asking. I just needed to say it out loud." Tonya hesitated, then bit her lip as if debating something. "Listen. I know someone. A woman who helps girls in desperate situations." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" Tonya glanced around, lowering her voice. "She connects women with rich men. For a price." Emma's stomach dropped. "You're joking." "I know it sounds bad," Tonya rushed to explain, "but these aren't just random men off the street. They are billionaires, CEOs, politicians. They pay for discretion. And they pay well." Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. "No," she said firmly. "I could never." "I get it," Tonya interrupted. "But if you're out of options, Madame Rose is the only person who can make money appear overnight." The name sounded eerie. Like something out of a crime novel. Tonya sighed and slipped a card into Emma's pocket. Just in case. That night, Emma lay awake in the tiny apartment she shared with her mother and Liam. Their home was barely livable. Peeling wallpaper, a broken heater, and an empty fridge. Her mother, frail and asleep on the couch, coughed weakly in her sleep. Liam curled beside her, unaware of the storm about to hit their lives. Emma stared at the ceiling. $100,000. That was what Tonya had whispered. She turned the business card over in her fingers. The name Madame Rose was embossed in gold, along with a number. Her pride screamed a no. But her circumstances whispered, "What choice do you have?" Tears burned her eyes. If she didn't do something, her family would be homeless. If she didn't find the money, her mother wouldn't get the treatment she needed. Her hands shook as she picked up her phone. She wasn't doing this for herself. She was doing it for them. She dialed. A smooth, sophisticated voice answered. "I was expecting your call." The next evening, Emma stood outside an extravagant 5-star hotel, dressed in a simple black dress. Her heart slammed against her ribs. A sleek black car had picked her up, and now, as she entered the penthouse suite, she felt like she was walking toward a guillotine. Madame Rose sat inside, sipping wine, watching Emma like a cat watches a trapped mouse. She was an elegant woman in her 50s, dressed in a blood-red dress, diamonds flashing on her fingers. "You're even prettier than I imagined," she mused, tilting her head. "He'll like you." Emma swallowed. Who is he?" "That's not your concern." Madame Rose smacked. "You're being paid to be a fantasy, not a girlfriend." Emma's stomach twisted. "What happens after?" she whispered. "After?" Madame Rose chuckled. "You take your money and disappear. No names, no attachments. One night, and your life changes forever." Emma clenched her fist. She wanted to scream, to run, but the image of her mother in that hospital bed held her in place. $100,000, Madame Rose reminded her, tapping a folder on the table. "Sign the contract, and it's yours." Emma's fingers trembled as she picked up the pen. One night. For her family. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she signed her name. A single knock at the door made her flinch. Madame Rose rose from her seat, giving Emma one last unreadable glance. "He's here." Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't do this. She had to do this. Madame Rose opened the door, and a tall figure stepped in. Dressed in a tailored black suit, exuding power. The man said nothing, but Emma felt the weight of his gaze. His voice was deep, smooth. "She's the one." "She is," Madame Rose confirmed. "Untouched. As you requested." A heavy silence filled the room. Emma didn't dare look up. The man walked closer, stopping just inches from her. The scent of expensive cologne, crisp and dark, filled her senses. His fingers tilted her chin up. She still couldn't see his face in the dim lighting. But his voice carried authority. "Do you know what you signed up for?" Emma's lips parted, but no words came out. She was trapped. No turning back now. The elevator ride to the penthouse suite felt like an eternity. Emma's hands were clenched into fists at her sides, her breath shallow. The fabric of her black dress felt too tight, the air inside the mirrored walls suffocating. With every passing floor, the weight of her decision pressed down on her, threatening to shatter her resolve. She wasn't supposed to be here. Yet, here she was. A polite chime sounded as the door slid open, revealing a grand entranceway lined with dark marble and soft, golden lighting. She stepped out hesitantly, her heels clicking against the floor. A woman in a sleek black suit stood by the doorway, expressionless and professional. "You'll need to wear this," the woman instructed, holding out a silk blindfold. Emma swallowed. "Is that necessary?" The woman didn't blink. "It's part of the arrangement." Her stomach twisted, but she took the blindfold with trembling fingers. The contract had been clear, no faces. No names. No emotions. Just one night. Her hands shook as she tied the soft fabric over her eyes, plunging herself into darkness. A moment later, a door creaked open. And then, footsteps. Slow. Measured. Male. The presence of another person in the room sent a cold shiver down her spine. She felt him before she heard him, his scent, crisp and expensive, a mix of cedar wood and something darker, more intoxicating. Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. This was it. There was no turning back now. A deep voice, rich and smooth, cut through the silence. "You're nervous." Emma's breath hitched. His tone wasn't cruel, but there was something unsettling about the way he read her so easily. She forced her voice to remain steady. "Wouldn't you be?" A pause. Then a soft, dark chuckle. "I suppose I would." A shift in the air. The sound of fabric moving. He was close, too close. I assume Madame Rose explained the rules, he asked. Yes. No names. She nodded. No emotions. She exhaled shakily. I remember. A long silence followed. Emma's entire body tensed as she felt him reach out, fingers grazing her wrist lightly before trailing up her arm. His touch was warm, slow, calculated, but as if he was memorizing the shape of her. Her breath came faster. Not out of fear, but something else. Something dangerous. His fingers reached her jawline, tilting her face slightly upward. She felt his presence loom over her, his breath brushing against her skin. Are you sure about this? His voice was softer now, almost hesitant. Emma bit her lip. No. She wasn't. But she thought of her mother, sick and weak in that hospital bed. She thought of Liam, who deserved a childhood without hunger, without homelessness. So she did the only thing she could. She lied. Yes. Silence. Then, his lips touched hers. The kiss was unexpected, not forceful, not demanding. It was careful. As if he were testing her, waiting for her to run. Emma didn't. She couldn't. His hand slid down to her waist, pulling her against him, and suddenly, the reality of the situation hit her all at once. She was standing in the middle of a luxurious penthouse suite, blindfolded, being held by a man whose name she didn't know. A man she would never see. Her heart pounded. Yet, when he deepened the kiss, something inside her gave in. For a moment, she let herself forget. Forget the fear, the shame, the weight of her choices. It was just heat. Just a transaction. Just one night. Time blurred after that. She remembered the feeling of silk sheets against her back. The warmth of his touch. The way he moved, controlled, yet desperate in ways he didn't want to show. He never said her name. Never whispered sweet lies. It was exactly as the contract had promised, no attachments, no expectations. And yet, somewhere between the hushed breaths and tangled sheets, Emma found herself wondering. Who is he? And why does he feel just as lost as I do? The sun was barely rising when Emma sat up in bed, her body sore, her heart hollow. She reached for the blindfold, fingers hesitating. Should she? The contract forbade it, but something inside her ached to see him. To know who he was. But before she could move, she felt it, a presence beside her. Awake. Watching. A deep voice broke the silence. Don't. Emma froze. The authority in his tone was undeniable. It wasn't a request. She slowly lowered her hands. A rustle of fabric told her he was getting up. A moment later, something cold touched her fingers, a thick envelope. Her stomach twisted. The money, he murmured. It's all there. Emma's fingers curled around it, bile rising in her throat. This was what she had agreed to. What she had sold herself for. Why did it feel like a curse? She swallowed back the bitterness and whispered, "Thank you." A pause. And then, his final words. "Don't come looking for me." The door closed behind him. Emma sat there for a long time, gripping the envelope, her heart shattered beyond repair. She would never see him again. At least. That's what she thought. Emma adjusted the crisp white blouse she'd borrowed from Tonya and took a deep breath before stepping into the towering glass building of Hawthorne Enterprises. This was it. A new job. A new beginning. A chance to leave the past where it belonged. 2 months had passed since that night. 2 months since she had walked away with $100,000 that felt heavier than gold. The money had saved her mother's life, paid off the hospital bills, cleared their debts, but it hadn't erased the guilt. It hadn't erased him. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. This job was her way forward. She had been lucky to land a position as an assistant at one of the most prestigious fashion companies in the country. If she worked hard enough, maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild her life. No more looking back. The sleek, modern office was a buzz of activity. Employees in tailored designer suits moved with purpose, the air thick with power and ambition. Emma clutched her employee badge and walked past a group of assistants huddled near the espresso bar. She barely made it past when she overheard their hushed voices. "Have you seen him yet?" one woman whispered. "No, but I heard he's back from Europe today. God help us. If the rumors are true, he's worse than his father. Ruthless, cold, and completely untouchable." Emma frowned. Who were they talking about? Before she could wonder any further, a sharp voice interrupted her thoughts. "You must be Emma Carter." She spun around to see a sharply dressed woman in her 40s, thin-rimmed glasses perched on the edge of her nose. "I'm Miss Kensington, Senior Executive Assistant. You'll be reporting directly to me," the woman said briskly, already walking down the hallway. "No personal calls during work hours, always be 5 steps ahead of your superior, Anne." She turned sharply, her gaze pinning Emma in place. "Whatever you do, never get in Mr. Houghton's way." Emma blinked. "Mr. Houghton?" Miss Kensington scoffed. "The CEO." Emma's stomach twisted. Oh, that's who everyone was whispering about. The infamous Alexander Houghton. She had heard the name before, a billionaire heir, rumored to be a brutal perfectionist with a heart of steel. Not that it mattered. She wouldn't be dealing with him directly. She just needed to keep her head down and do her job. Right. 3 hours into her first day, Emma sat at her desk, organizing files, when the energy in the office shifted. The soft hum of conversation vanished. The sound of heels clicking against marble floors froze. Then, a deep, commanding voice cut through the silence. "Cancel the meeting with Ford and Company. If they can't meet my deadline, they're useless to me." Emma's breath hitched. That voice. No. No, no, no. It can't be. Slowly, terrified to confirm the impossible, she lifted her gaze toward the glass doors of the executive conference room. And there he was. Tall. Impossibly sharp in a tailored black suit. The same air of dominance, the same scent of cedarwood and something darker. Alexander Houghton. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. The man she had given herself to that night. The man she thought she would never see again. He stood near the window, flipping through documents with cold efficiency, his piercing gaze fixed on the pages, until he looked up. Right at her. Her lungs forgot how to walk. For a split second, something flickered across his face, recognition. Shock. Amusement. Then, his expression hardened. Emma snapped her head down, pretending to focus on her files, but she could feel his eyes on her. Studying her. Calculating. No. This wasn't happening. She had survived that night, only to walk right into his world. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. He needed air. Heart hammering, Emma grabbed the folder and hurried toward the elevator. She turned the corner too fast. And collided into a solid wall of muscle. A strong hand shot out, gripping her waist before she could stumble backward. Emma's eyes snapped up. And locked onto his. Alexander Houghton. Up close, he was even more devastatingly intense. Those dark, unreadable eyes. The same touch that had once traced fire along her skin. He hadn't let go. Neither had she. For a breathless moment, time froze. Then, his lips curved into the slightest smirk. "So," he murmured, voice so low only she could hear. "You do work for me now." Emma's stomach dropped. She forced herself to step back, her face carefully blank. "Excuse me, sir." Something flickered in his eyes, challenge. Amusement. He leaned in, just enough to make her heart stutter. "You're going to pretend, aren't you?" Emma's fingers tightened around the folder. She lifted her chin. "I don't know what you mean." His smirk deepened, but his gaze turned sharp. "Dangerous. Liar." Emma's pulse skyrocketed. And just like that, he walked past her, leaving her standing there, shaken to her core. This wasn't over. Not even close. Emma had been at Hawthorne Enterprises for only a week, and it was already hell. Not because of the workload, she had expected high expectations at a company like this. Not even because of the cutthroat office politics. No. The real nightmare was Alexander Hawthorne. He didn't just ignore her. He tormented her. Every morning, a fresh pile of impossible tasks landed on her desk. Last-minute reports with unrealistic deadlines. Meetings scheduled at inconvenient hours. Errands no executive assistant should be doing. Reorganize the entire department's files. Manually. Compile a list of every investor's personal interest by tomorrow. Prepare a full report on fashion market trends by the end of the day. It was deliberate. A silent, calculated punishment. She wasn't sure if he wanted her to quit or if he was simply enjoying watching her struggle. But what frustrated him the most, she never complained. She refused to let him win. So she worked through lunch. Through exhaustion. Through the burning in her eyes when he walked past her desk without a second glance. She was just an employee. And he was just a mistake she had already forgotten. Or so she told herself. By Friday evening, the office had emptied out. Most employees had escaped into their weekends, but Emma was still at her desk, typing furiously. Her latest assignment. Revise a 200-page report by midnight. Her fingers ached. Her head pounded. This was ridiculous. And then, a deep voice cut through the silence. "You're still here." Emma's fingers froze over the keyboard. She knew exactly who it was. She inhaled slowly before turning in her chair. He stood in the doorway of his office, arms crossed, dark eyes unreadable. Emma forced a polite smile. "Deadlines don't complete themselves, sir." His jaw tensed, as if he didn't like the way she addressed him. "You should learn when to walk away." The comment was so loaded, she almost choked. She held his gaze. "If I walked away from everything that was difficult, I wouldn't be here." Something flickered in his expression. Something dangerous. Then, his lips curved, not in amusement, but in challenge. "Then drop what you're doing and come inside." Her pulse stuttered. For a moment, she didn't move. His tone was calm. Commanding. Like he was waiting for her to defy him. And damn it, she wanted to. She wanted to stand, tell him to go to hell, walk out of this office, and never look back. But her body betrayed her. Because against all logic, against all common sense, she followed him in. The door clicked shut behind her. Emma forced herself to stay calm as she stood in front of his massive desk. Alexander leaned against the edge, arms crossed, watching her. The silence stretched. "Then, how long do you plan to keep up this act?" Her stomach knotted. She lifted her chin. "I don't know what you mean." A humorless chuckle. "Really? You walk into my company, my world, acting as if we've never met." Emma clenched her jaw. "Because we haven't." His dark eyes burned into hers. She didn't blink. Didn't falter. Because she knew the moment she showed weakness, he'd pounce. "You're lying," he said, voice soft but lethal. He shrugged. Believe what you want. Alexander's fingers drummed against the desk. His body was completely still, but she could feel his frustration. His anger. That night, he said lowly. Tell me it meant nothing to you. Emma's chest tightened. It was a trap. A cruel, twisted test. She didn't dare break eye contact as she said, it meant nothing to me. Silence. A sharp, dangerous silence. His expression didn't change. But his eyes did. They darkened, flashed with something raw. Something unreadable. And for a split second, she thought she saw pain. But just as quickly, it was gone. Alexander let out a slow breath and laughed. Not out of amusement. Out of disbelief. You're a terrible liar, Miss Carter. Emma's fingers dug into her sides. Good thing I don't need to lie to you, Mr. Houghton. His smirk was slow, dangerous. We'll see about that. She turned sharply, moving toward the door before he could see the truth in her eyes. Before he could see that she was the liar he accused her of being. Because the truth? That night had meant everything. And she hated herself for it. Alexander Houghton wasn't a man who allowed distractions. He built an empire by being ruthless, cold, and completely in control. Yet here he was, sitting in his glass office, watching her. Emma Carter. The woman who refused to acknowledge what happened between them. The woman who lied to his face, saying that night meant nothing. And the worst part. He believed her. Or at least, he wanted to. Because if that night had meant nothing to her, then why the hell was he still thinking about it? Still thinking about her. It pissed him off. And yet, his gaze stayed locked on her, drawn to her like an addict craving his next hit. He had almost managed to pull himself away when he saw him. Liam Carter. One of his top executives, standing at Emma's desk, smiling at her. And worse, she was smiling back. Something in Alexander's chest tightened. Liam leaned in closer, whispering something that made her laugh. A real laugh. A soft, genuine sound that Alexander had never heard from her. His fingers curled into fist. I need you in my office. Now. Emma's head snapped up at the sound of his voice. Liam took a step back, blinking in confusion. Sir. Not you, Alexander said coldly, eyes locked on Emma. Ah. Her smile vanished. She stood stiffly, nodding once before following him into his office. The second the door closed, he turned to face her. Are you enjoying yourself? He asked, voice deceptively calm. She frowned. Excuse me. I didn't realize I was paying you to flirt with my executives. Her eyes flashed with fury. I wasn't flirting. His jaw clenched. Then what would you call it? She crossed her arms. Talking. Which, last I checked, wasn't against company policy. Her defiance infuriated him. Do you think Liam is interested in just talking? She scoffed. What I do outside of work is none of your concern, Mr. Houghton. His teeth ground together. Because she was right. She didn't belong to him. But that didn't stop the possessive fire burning in his veins. The same thing to do was fire her. End this obsession before it got out of hand. You're dismissed, he said, turning away. Pack your things and leave. Silence. Then. A quiet breath. No. His eyes snapped to her. Excuse me. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with unwavering defiance. You can make my job miserable, but I won't quit. I worked too hard to get here. Fire me if you want, but I won't walk away. Alexander stared at her. Everything inside him screamed to say you're done. To end this now. To erase her from his life before she consumed more of his thoughts. But then he saw it. The fire in her eyes. The same fire that had burned in her that night. The same fire that made him lose control. And suddenly, he knew. He couldn't let her go. Even if it destroyed him. Emma barely made it through the workday. Her body was exhausted, her mind scattered, but she held herself together until her phone rang. Mom. Her heart clenched as she picked up. Mom. What's wrong? A weak voice trembled through the line. Emma, the hospital, they are saying we can't stay if we don't pay more. I don't know what to do, sweetheart. Emma's breath hitched. No. No, no, no. She had already given them everything she had. How much? She whispered, gripping the phone. Her mother hesitated. 15,000. By the end of the week, Emma's stomach dropped. 15,000. Where was she supposed to find that kind of money? I'll fix it, she said, forcing strength into her voice. Don't worry. Even though she had no idea how. She arrived home that night to chaos. The second she stepped into the tiny apartment, a deep booming voice sent ice down her spine. Miss Carter. She turned sharply. A tall, heavy-set man in a black coat leaned against her doorway, flipping through some papers. Behind him stood two other men, debt collectors. Her blood ran cold. Not now. Not tonight. Miss Carter, the man said again, too casual, too calm. We are here about your father's remaining debt. Emma gritted her teeth. I've been paying it off. The man sighed dramatically, pulling out a document. Not fast enough. And interest is a cruel thing. He tapped the page. You now owe $25,000. Her breath caught. That's impossible. It was half that just last month. That was last month. He stepped closer. This is now. Her hands trembled. I just need more time. A smirk. Time isn't free. One of the men behind him cracked his knuckles. Emma's stomach twisted. I don't have anything left, she whispered. The leader scared. Not yet. But I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. His eyes trailed over her body. A cold chill ran through her spine. No, she snapped. Absolutely not. He shrugged, smacking. Then I guess we'll be back. And next time, we won't be so polite. And with that, they left. Leaving her shaking. Trapped. Out of options. Emma barely slept. By morning, her last resort was clear. She took a deep breath and stepped into Alexander Houghton's office. He looked up from his desk, dark eyes unreadable. I need to talk to you, she said, voice firm. He leaned back, studying her. Go on. She swallowed, gripping the edge of the desk. You once said you wanted something from me. His gaze sharpened. She forced the words out. Is the offer still on the table? Silence. Alexander slowly rose, walking around the desk until he stood dangerously close. She refused to step back. He studied her face, as if searching for something. Then, how much do you need? Her stomach tightened. He already knew. She hesitated, pride battling with desperation. 40,000. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. He leaned in. Too close. Too intense. Then here's my counteroffer. Her breath caught as he whispered. Be mine for 1 month, and I'll take care of everything. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had expected money. A loan. But this? She shook her head. I'm not for sale. He smacked. You already were, once. Her cheeks burned. That was different. Was it? His voice was calm, but there was something else beneath it. Something dangerous. Emma clenched her fist. What do you even mean by, be yours? He tilted his head. You'll live with me. Dine with me. Sleep in my bed. Her stomach flipped. He leaned even closer. 1 month, Emma. And I'll make all your problems disappear. Her mind screamed at her to walk away. To refuse. To find another way. But then she thought of her mother lying in a hospital bed. Of her brother struggling through school. Of the debt collectors waiting for the right moment to destroy everything. She swallowed hard. When do I start? A slow, satisfied smile curved his lips. Tonight. Emma sat in the grand office of Alexander Houghton's mansion, the weight of the contract in her hands. She skimmed over the terms, her stomach twisting at the words. Live in his home. Accompany him to events as his date. Obey his rules. The last part made her jaw clench. Obey? She asked, looking up. Alexander sat across from her, hands folded, watching her like a predator watches prey. Yes, he said smoothly. Her fingers curled around the papers. I'm not a pet. His lips curved into an amused smirk. Then don't act like one. This is a contract, Emma. Not a cage. She exhaled sharply. And if I refuse to follow one of your rules? His expression darkened. Then you break the contract. And your mother's hospital stays, your brother's tuition, everything I agreed to cover, he leaned in. Gone. A chill ran through her. This wasn't a relationship. It was a business deal. And yet, why did it feel so much more dangerous than that? With a deep breath, she grabbed the pen. And signed her name. Emma Carter. The moment the ink dried, her life was no longer hers. Emma stood in the doorway of the massive estate, gripping her suitcase. This place was a palace. Polished marble floors. Golden chandeliers. Too much space for one man. Welcome home, Alexander murmured behind her. She turned. It's not my home. His lips twitched, as if he expected that response. It is for the next 30 days. Her stomach tightened. 30 days. 1 month under the same roof as him. Could she survive this? The first few days were cold. They barely spoke beyond what was necessary. He gave orders. She followed them, grudgingly. Until the first dinner event. She wore a dress he had chosen. A sleek black gown that hugged her body in ways that made her uncomfortable. The moment they walked into the venue, eyes followed them. Whispers. Who is she? Another gold digger. She's just like the rest. Emma's fist clenched, but before she could react, Alexander's hand slid around her waist, pulling her closer. The crowd went silent. He leaned in, lips brushing her ear. Ignore them, he murmured. They don't matter. Something about the way he said it, so firm, so certain, made her chest tighten. Why did he care what people thought? Wasn't this all just an act? Days passed, and she began to notice things. The way he never let anyone belittle her in public. The way he touched her protectively when cameras were watching. The way his sharp edges softened when he thought she wasn't looking. One night, she saw him in his office, fingers pressed against his temples, stress weighing on his shoulders. Before she could stop herself, she asked, "Are you okay?" He glanced up, surprised. For a moment, there was no arrogance. No power. Just a man who looked tired. Go to bed, Emma. She hesitated. Alexander. Now. She obeyed. But for the first time, it wasn't out of obligation. It happened late at night. Emma stood by the window of her lavish guest room, staring at the city lights. A knock. She turned to see Alexander leaning against the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You're awake," he murmured. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. He exhaled, stepping inside. "This isn't easy for you." She laughed softly. "You think?" A pause. Then, "I don't want you to hate me, Emma." Her breath caught. For the first time, he sounded real. She met his gaze, searching for something, some sign that he was more than the ruthless businessman everyone feared. Her heart raced. Electric tension hung between them, pulling them closer. But she couldn't forget what he'd done. What he'd forced her into. So instead of answering, she turned away. Because if she let herself believe there was more to him, she wouldn't survive this month. The night was silent. Too silent. Emma couldn't sleep. Not after what happened at dinner. Alexander had been colder than usual, his jaw tight, his grip on her waist like iron as they navigated the social event. Then she saw her. A woman, tall, elegant, and cruel-eyed, watching Alexander with something between hatred and ownership. Emma had barely managed to whisper, "Who is she?" before Alexander pulled her away. And now, hours later, she stood outside his office door, debating whether to knock. Before she could decide, a voice startled her. "If you have something to say, come in." She hesitated, then pushed the door open. Alexander sat behind his massive desk, one hand gripping a glass of whiskey, the other massaging his temple. He didn't look up. "What do you want, Emma?" His voice was rougher than usual. She crossed her arms. "I want the truth." A bitter chuckle. "Truth is subjective." She stepped forward. "I saw the way you looked at her. The way she looked at you." "Who is she?" Silence. Then, "Sophia Lancaster." Emma's stomach twisted. "Your ex?" His grip on the glass tightened. "Something like that." She exhaled. "I don't believe you." His gaze snapped to hers. "Excuse me." Emma swallowed hard but didn't back down. "You don't look at an ex like that." That was hatred. That was something deeper. His jaw clenched. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She was my fiancée." Her breath caught. "What?" "An arranged engagement. A business merger disguised as love." His voice was sharp, but beneath it was something else. Pain. Emma felt her pulse quicken. "But you're not married," she whispered. He let out a humorless laugh. "No. Because I caught her in bed with my best friend." The words hung between them like smoke, suffocating the air. Emma didn't know what to say. But Alexander wasn't finished. "I was 23. Foolish. I believed in loyalty." His voice was almost mocking. "Sophia and I were raised in the same circles. I knew we weren't in love, but I thought, maybe over time, we'd find something real." His fingers traced the rim of the whiskey glass, lost in thought. "Then one night, I walked into our penthouse and found them together. In my bed." Emma's heart ached. "Alexander." His eyes darkened. "Don't. Pity me, and this conversation is over." She pressed her lips together. "Did you love her?" she asked softly. He scoffed. "No." Then his voice dropped. "But I trusted her." And somehow, Emma knew that hurt him more. For the first time, Alexander looked exhausted. As if he had been carrying this for too long. Emma hesitated, then, without thinking, reached out, placing her hand over his. His entire body went still. Slowly, his gaze lifted to meet hers. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear. "Because you're different." Her breath caught. She should have pulled away. Should have ignored the way her heart pounded at his words. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, maybe not every woman is like her. Alexander exhaled sharply, as if he wanted to believe her. But the shadows in his eyes told her he wasn't ready to trust again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And somehow, that realization hurt more than it should have. Emma wasn't sure when it happened. Maybe it was the night he told her about Sophia. Maybe it was the way his eyes softened when he thought no one was looking. Or maybe it had been happening all along. She was in love with Alexander Houghton. And it was a disaster waiting to happen. It started as a simple moment. A quiet night in his mansion. Rain pattering against the glass windows. Emma stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames, lost in thought. She didn't hear him approach until she felt his presence behind her. "You've been avoiding me," he murmured. She closed her eyes. "I don't know what you mean." He exhaled sharply. "Don't lie to me, Emma." She turned to face him. His gaze was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Something dangerous. "Why do you care?" she whispered. A muscle in his jaw ticked. "Because you make me feel things I shouldn't." Her heart pounded. "Like what?" A long silence. Then, in one swift motion, he closed the distance between them. And kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. Consuming. A fire that had been burning for too long. Emma gasped against his lips, but she didn't pull away. Because in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the contract. Not the past. Not the inevitable heartbreak waiting for her. Just this. Just him. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. Emma looked up at him, searching his face. "Say something," she whispered. Alexander stared at her, his expression almost tortured. "I don't know how to do this." Her heart clenched. "Do what?" "Love someone." His voice was raw, as if admitting it physically hurt him. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Then let me teach you." His fingers brushed against her cheek. For the first time, it felt real. It felt like hope. But hope is a dangerous thing. And in the cruelest way possible, it was about to be ripped away from her. The next morning, the entire world knew. Emma woke up to whispers from the mansion staff, eyes watching her with judgment and disgust. By the time she stepped into the grand dining room, Alexander was already waiting. His expression was unreadable, but his grip on the newspaper in front of him was tight. Too tight. "Sit." Her stomach twisted at his tone. She hesitated but obeyed. Without a word, he slid the newspaper across the table. Emma's breath caught. Headline: Billionaire Alexander Houghton's new love interest. Bought for a night. Her hands trembled as she read the article. Every detail of her secret was there. The one-night deal. The money she accepted. The reason she had done it. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "Alexander, I don't." His voice was ice. She flinched. "Please, just let me explain." He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "There's nothing to explain, Emma." His voice was deadly quiet. "I was stupid enough to believe you were different." Her chest ached. "I am different." He let out a hollow laugh. "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're just another woman with a price tag." Tears stung her eyes. "You don't mean that." His jaw clenched. "Don't I?" Silence. Then, the final blow. "Get out." Her heart shattered. She had known this moment would come. She had just never expected it to hurt this much. From a distance, Sophia Lancaster watched everything unfold. She smirked, sipping her champagne. Poor Emma, she mused. She actually thought he could love her. Beside her, a sleazy tabloid journalist grinned. "You're sure you want to go through with this, Miss Lancaster?" Sophia's eyes gleamed with malice. "Oh, darling," she purred. "I'm just getting started." Emma packed her things in silence. Her hands trembled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Hawthorne Enterprises had been more than just a job. It had been her second chance. And Alexander? He had been her greatest mistake. "Miss Carter." A timid voice interrupted. Emma turned to see Lisa, one of the junior assistants, standing at the door. Her eyes were filled with sympathy. "Is it true? Are you really leaving?" Emma forced a smile. "Looks that way." Lisa hesitated. "I don't believe what they are saying about you." Emma's throat tightened. "It doesn't matter, Lisa." Lisa's expression hardened. "But Mr. Hawthorne, he..." Emma's heart clenched. He made his choice. And now, she was making hers. With one last glance at the office she had worked so hard to earn, Emma walked away. She didn't look back. Alexander sat in his office, gripping the scandalous article with white-knuckled fist. His mind replayed their last conversation. Her eyes, wide with pain. Her voice, pleading for him to believe her. And he had thrown her away. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see his head of security, Marcus, standing there. "Sir, I think you need to see this." Marcus placed a folder on the desk. Inside were surveillance photos. Sophia Lancaster meeting with a journalist. Sophia handing over a file full of Emma's past. Sophia orchestrating everything. Alexander's stomach turned to ice. "She set her up," he whispered. Marcus nodded grimly. "And we have proof." A breath. Then, a storm. Alexander shot up from his chair, eyes blazing. "Find Emma." "Sir, she already left." Alexander clenched his jaw. Then, with deadly calm. "Then I'll bring her back." Emma sat on a park bench, staring blankly at the city skyline. She had spent her whole life fighting. Fighting for survival. Fighting for her family. Fighting for love. And now, she had nothing left to fight for. Then, suddenly, the giant billboard above the city center flickered on. Emma's breath hitched. Because there, in front of thousands of people, was Alexander Hawthorne. Live. On air. Confessing. "I made a mistake." His voice was rough, vulnerable. "I let my past cloud my judgment. And because of that, I hurt the only woman I have ever truly cared about." Pedestrians stopped in their tracks. Phones recorded. Emma's heart pounded. "Her name is Emma Carter," he continued. "She is not a liar. She is not a gold digger. She is the strongest, most selfless person I've ever met." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "I don't care about my family's name. I don't care about my wealth." His jaw tightened. "If giving it all up means proving my love for her, then so be it." Emma's hands shook. Because there, on a billboard for the entire world to see, Alexander Hawthorne signed away his inheritance. "Emma," his voice softened, "if you're watching this, come back to me." Tears blurred her vision. Her body refused to move. Until. Turn around. Her breath caught. Because he was there. In front of her. Real. Breathless. Desperate. She barely had time to react before he grabbed her face, eyes searching hers. "Tell me there's nothing left," he whispered. "Tell me, and I'll walk away." Emma opened her mouth. But no words came out. Because her heart had already answered for her. I hate you, she whispered. His lips twitched. Liar. A tear slipped down her cheek. You broke me, Alexander. And I'll spend a lifetime making it right. Her breath hitched. She should walk away. She should make him suffer. But instead, she crashed into him, kissing him with everything she had left. The crowd around them erupted in cheers. But Emma only heard one thing. The sound of his heart, beating for her. And maybe, just maybe, she could finally stop fighting. Because for once in her life, she had already won.